Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 59 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is giving. Our quote of the day comes to us from Kathy Calvin. Giving is not just about making a donation, it is about making a difference. I'm extremely humbled for today's episode. Not only have I been a big fan of our guest's work for many years, but I've looked up to him as well. As one of the best professional speakers for over 31 years and a multiple New York Times best-selling author, his accomplishments speak for themselves. I think you will really enjoy both today's episode as well as the theme of the day. It is my complete honor and privilege to introduce Mark Sanborn. Mark, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thanks. It's good to be with you, Christopher.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to make it happen today?
I wake up ready to make it happen.
I figured you'd say so much. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up on themselves or their dreams. And I was curious if you have either a story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you and you could have given up, but you didn't.
I think my entire speaking career is based on persistence and perseverance because I've been a full-time professional speaker for 31 years, but I got interested in speaking when I faced an abject failure. As a 10-year-old in a speech contest in 4-H, I did so badly and was so embarrassed that instead of saying, you know what, I never want to do that again, or done that, got the t-shirt, I decided I wanted to learn how to be a public speaker. So I started entering all these contests that were available at the time and still for people that are, in elementary school and junior high and high school. And as I started to learn how to be a better public speaker, I had one goal, and that was before I graduated from high school or quit competing, I wanted to win a national public speaking competition. And to make a very long story short, persisted, came close. It was my final year of competition that I won the National FFA Public Speaking Contest. And if I had not won that year, I would have not achieved my goal. But more importantly, like Zig Ziglar says, it's not what you get by achieving your goals, but who you become by achieving your goals or pursuing your goals that matters. So that's really what got me started in public speaking. And today it's how I make my living. And I've had an absolute blast over the intervening years.
That's a great story, and I know a little bit about 4-H just because I went to college down in the Maryland area, but I didn't know that speaking was a component of it.
It was back then. I think it still is, but it's been a long time since I've been in 4-H.
Mark, one of the areas we often talk about is personal development, and a lot of our listeners are looking and interested in improving different areas of their lives, and I was curious, as a very successful author, if you've read something recently or perhaps there was a book that really stood out that had a significant impact on your life.
I read mostly fiction these days. I've read so many nonfiction books and so much within my own genre that I found the best way to be creative is kind of to read outside of genre. When I write books, I stop reading nonfiction books because I don't want to accidentally channel somebody else's ideas inadvertently and not give them adequate credit. And so the latest book that I read that I just enjoyed thoroughly is by Amor Towles, who right now is very famous for his book, A Gentleman in Moscow. Frankly, I couldn't quite get into that book, but the book of his that I loved was Rules of Civility. And that's about some relationships in the Prohibition area in New York. And, the research is pretty interesting. We can learn a great deal from well-written fiction books. So if somebody says, I don't have time to read fiction, I'm into personal development, well, maybe you ought to rethink that and look at the fiction that you're reading, because you learn to empathize when you get into really good character development in a book like The Rules of Civility. In terms of a nonfiction book, I've got friends that are extraordinarily good writers. I would say, people say, well, are you going to recommend your own books? Well, that would be self-serving. I think I write good books, but My favorite nonfiction book recently is a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And in essence, that book is about how to avoid skipping along the surface, multitasking, and being distracted, and how to really schedule blocks of time that you can do significant creative work. And I highly recommend that book, Deep Work by Cal Newport.
I like that. That's something that we talk about all the time, which is time blocking. And I think it's often overlooked. And Kevin Cruz, a New York Times bestselling author, had a book recently about time management, and that's one of the things he talks about a lot too, is focusing on some blocks of time, whether it's 15 or 30 minutes. So I definitely would recommend that book, and we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Great.
Speaking of books, Mark, you happen to be a multiple New York Times best-selling author, and The Fred Factor and You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader happen to be two of my all-time favorite books. I heard you
Thanks.
No, the great books. I heard you once speak about The Fred Factor. I believe you said something along the lines of it being a life book as opposed to a self-help or personal development book. I was curious if you wouldn't mind explaining that a bit.
I wrote The Fred Factor is kind of a business philosophy book, but I'm a big believer that, truth is transferable, that we create these false dichotomies between business truth and personal truth. The application changes, the context changes, but the underlying principles are the same. And The Fred Factor, which is based on a true story about a real life postal carrier I met, it really talks about what I think are the key principles for success in business and life. Now, interestingly, most people I think that bought it or heard about it thought it was a customer service book. And, that's fine. You can use it however you want to. But the four principles about everybody makes a difference, and it's all built on relationship, and you can create value without spending money to do it, and the importance of reinventing yourself. Those to me aren't principles specific to certainly not specific to customer service, nor even business. Those are just life principles.
Could not agree more. I think that book is so applicable in all areas of life. And your other book, You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader, I think is a great book. And as I mentioned before we recorded, we do quite a bit of work with collegiate basketball teams. And that's something we touch on all the time. And we actually indirectly and directly talk about your book in the sense of whether somebody's a captain on a basketball team or whether they're a senior or a freshman, you don't need a title to be a leader. And that's something that I think is just remarkable. And I think that book specifically covers all walks of life, whether it's companies, business, family, or just in relationships in general.
I agree. You can give someone a title, but it won't make them a leader. The skills of influence and persuasion and leadership are what give people credibility. And we've all regrettably had experience with people who had titles but couldn't lead. But the good news is we've all worked with some amazing leaders that didn't have any real formal titles but still made a positive difference in their organizations.
Yeah, no, and you touch on that word quite a bit as a positive difference, and I appreciate you referencing that because that's something we also really pride ourselves on, is making that positive difference in someone's life, and that's something that we try to do in every single episode we release of our show.
I talk about in a recent book that leadership and ambition are two different things. If you do something and you personally gain from it, as long as it was legal, moral, and ethical, that's fine. That's an act of ambition. But I believe that true leadership is always something that benefits the greater good. Now, that doesn't mean you as a leader won't benefit, but it means that you as a leader aren't the only person that benefits. When you do something as a leader, you benefit your team or your organization or your community or your church or your synagogue. And the point of the matter is that it's not about just what you get. Leadership is about what you're able to give. And of course, that's the ultimate, value equation, the win-win solution where you create value for people. And then as a result, you win because you created that value for them.
No, that leads me to something else. Is I heard you speak about greatness versus fame. Could you possibly elaborate on that for a bit?
Sure. Well, I think that's an important distinction because so many young people today look at professional athletes or musicians or just famous people, and they want to be famous. And I want to say that there's nothing wrong with fame, except that fame is about what you get, attention and accolades and applause. But greatness is what you give. And I want to say Mother Teresa was great. Today, I saw a guy on CNN in the wake of the terrible mass shooting in Las Vegas who in essence, is truly a great human being no one had ever heard of before. A guy named what is Cody Robertson from Ohio, who befriended a woman at this concert who was tragically killed by this shooter. And not only did he stay with her to get her into the ambulance, but he sought out her cell phone so he could notify her family. And he found her somehow in the hospital. And even after she had passed, he waited, changed his flight so that he could be there for her family when they showed up. And it was so heartwarming because he's certainly getting a lot of attention right now. But, 10 days ago, and who knows, 10 days from now, he'll just be back to being a great person who's predisposed to go above and beyond the call of duty and do the right thing. So fame is what you get, but greatness is based on what you give.
That's a great story, and I was just talking to a client this afternoon in that horrible Las Vegas shootings. What happens is a lot of people step up and play big, and he's clearly an example of somebody that paid it forward. And I think, unfortunately, these tragedies, there are some good that comes out, and true and good people really step up to the plate and do the right thing. So I think his story is probably some of many that we're going to hear over the next few days, and I think that hopefully there'll be more people that follow by example and follow and lead by doing something and stepping up.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm sure you've heard it, perhaps used it, that, crisis doesn't create character, it reveals it. In a crisis, you become who you are. You either, run over people to escape, or you do what this fellow did, and you stay at great personal risk to help others. So I applaud, like you say, all the people who in the midst of this horrible tragedy chose to play big.
Yeah, it's great when we hear about those people that play big, and especially not only just the Las Vegas shootings, but there's been a lot of negativity flowing throughout the media the last few weeks. I was curious, Mark, life is very challenging and there are obstacles that come each and every day. I was curious, what motivates and drives you to keep going every single day?
Well, first and foremost, for me, it's my worldview, which is based on my faith. I'm a believer, and I know not everyone shares that same worldview, but it's very important to me. And in that worldview, it is about not just what you get, but what you give. I was fortunate, I was raised in a family where my parents really taught me the power of commitment. Commitment isn't based on feeling. Commitment's based on a choice, and it's tested when you don't feel like doing something or you don't feel like staying in a relationship, but you choose to anyhow. And then finally, I would say, I think life is best lived when it's interesting and challenging. And in my new book, The Potential Principle, I say that you only build strength through resistance. So don't always take the path of least resistance. The way you grow and the way you become better is you take the path of some resistance and you build mental muscle through doing it.
Speaking of your new book, The Potential Principle, I just read it last week, and I have to say it's filled with a ton of good information, a little bit different than your other books. If you don't mind me asking, what led you to write this book?
Well, there were a few things, but first and foremost, most of the clients that I work with, the organizations that bring me in to speak, they're already really good at what they do. Some of them are the very best at what they do. And I always remind people that, the people that most need to hear the sermon often don't go to church. And the companies that could benefit most from good consultants or coaches or speakers or authors often don't make that investment. And so I wrote a book that can be applied to anybody at any part of their journey, but I really wrote with my eye on those people who are already very successful, will want to keep getting better. Because the challenge is the better you become, the harder it is to get better. I'm sure in your work with basketball teams, the better a player becomes, the more important nuances are. You start with a young kid that doesn't have any fundamental basketball skills, and in short time, you can help them establish that base. But you start with somebody who's already a rock star collegiate or NBA player, and any improvement they're able to attain is going to come much more slowly and incrementally and probably take much more effort.
No, I could not agree more, and I think I would definitely recommend your new book to other people that are looking to improve different areas of their life, and also for those that have liked your other books. It's right up there as far as another great written book.
Well, thank you very much. I like writing books, and I write with the whole idea that they're little books about big ideas, and in a short amount of time, hopefully, when you're done reading, you'll have some things you can use to make your business or life better.
No, I like that, your business or your life. So we utilize a daily quote in each of our shows, and I was curious if you have a favorite quote.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is from G.K. Chesterton, a Brit who's been gone many years, but he said, "The world will never lack for wonders, only wonder." And it's such a subtle quote, sometimes it pays to unpack it. What he was saying is the world's a fascinating place, and so we'll never lack for things to be curious or fascinated about. The only thing we might lack for is our own curiosity or fascination. And in doing that, he put the responsibility on us to say, hey, if you're bored, that's a choice. We don't live in a boring world, and the world's only boring when you stop looking for all the amazing things that are in it.
I like that. That's a great quote. Here's a little different question for you. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, I don't want to sound cliche, and you're a person of faith. Everybody, or many people would say, obviously Christ, because that is, he is the focus of my faith. But I don't want to, knowing that a lot of people that are listening may or may not share that same worldview. The guy that I would really get a kick out of having dinner with is the Apostle Paul. You say, well, but he's another religious guy. Yeah, but he was a religious guy I could relate to, because he said, I'm the chief of sinners. And yet, even though he knew he was a deeply flawed person, he never gave up his pursuit of living the life that he was called to live and helping others. So what I like about the Apostle Paul, he's easy to relate to. He accomplished a great deal in the church, but he was the first to admit, boy, he had his own struggles and his own challenges.
No, that would be quite an interesting dinner. As we're always looking to provide value and different calls to actions for our listeners, I was curious if you have either a specific morning or daily ritual that you can attribute your personal or professional success to.
Well, I've been a morning person most of my adult life for the simple reason that if I get up before everybody else, it gives me uninterrupted time to think and learn and study and exercise. Once everybody else starts getting up, then my day is intertwined with theirs. So my morning ritual almost always includes some form of physical fitness, which directly impacts my ability to think clearly and my attitude. It usually includes some reading. And I also like to, I've got my email set up so that I don't wake up to 100 emails. I wake up to 6 or 8 or 10. And I like to start my day with a clean inbox. And I know there are lots of people that would argue and say, oh, no, don't check your email till mid-morning. But, it works for me. I feel like I got a blank slate when I've got all the things that need to be done out of the way, and then I can focus on the things that I want to do.
I got to ask, is there a secret behind having a clean inbox?
Yeah, there is. There's a great software program, and it's free, called Unroll Me, unroll.me. And I've actually had people call me an email and say they want to kiss me because I turned them on to it. A friend turned me on to it, and basically it's a way to manage your inbox. You can either, it automatically lets you choose to either keep something in your inbox, send it to a file called the Unroll Me file, or unsubscribe from it. And it's literally the secret to how I've been able to eliminate 90% of the superfluous, unnecessary email in my business.
Wow, well, that is great news, and I will definitely put that in the show notes as well, because as soon as we're done with this recording, I'm going to look into that myself.
Good. I think you'll dig it.
So he might be a tough question for you. What has been the toughest decision you've ever made?
Well, that's a question that does require some thinking. Wow, there have been a lot of tough decisions I've made, and regrettably, there have been some decisions I made poorly. I'm going to morph that a little bit, because a question I've often been asked, it's similar to that, and that is, if you could live your life differently, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? And honestly, I wouldn't do anything differently, not because I haven't screwed up a great deal and made a lot of mistakes and don't have a lot of amends that I would like to make. But if you change anything about your past, it changes who you are in your present. And as somebody that readily believes we can all be better, we have to recognize that, and I love this quote from Tony McGee, who's the founder of Lagunitas Brewing Company. He says, you are what you've done. And that's like just a few words that summarizes your life. You are the cumulative decisions and things that you've done. And I take that a step further and I say, the good news is you become what you'll do differently. So we have that mechanism to change our lives no matter where we're at by just doing things differently, choosing to do different things. And I think that's the key to development and improvement is making better choices. And the only way typically most of us learn to make better choices is by learning from the bad choices we made in the past.
No, I think that is so true. And I think I've asked that question in some way, shape, or form. And I think what people often forget is that if you change the past, it's going to change your current position or your future. So I think it's not only changing, but it's making maybe better decisions or maybe more informed decisions.
Yeah, don't try to change your past. Learn from it and change what you can. And that is what you do today that affects who you become tomorrow.
No, I could not agree more at that. So I wanted to ask you if there's anything exciting that you're working on that you'd like to share with our listeners in addition to your new book.
Well, I'm working on another book, and I keep changing my mind on what I'm going to write about. If anybody that's familiar with my work and reads my books and likes what I've written has a good idea, I'm at the point where I'm willing to entertain it because I need to start work pretty quickly. That isn't to say that I don't have a focus. One of the things that I'm working on right now is kind of researching and understanding the role of emotions in business and how to create positive emotions in the people we do business with and the people that we serve as customers. But, having just come off the release of the Potential Principle, and if anybody wants to see what that book is about and get more information, just go to potentialprinciple.com. I'm putting my brain a little bit in neutral right now to give myself a chance to recharge.
No, I like that the positive principles in business, and I think that could be something that's very, very interesting for many people because I think, unfortunately, in today's day and age, there's not enough focus on the importance of positivity, not only in the workforce, but in your family, on a team, in a corporation. So I think that that might be something very interesting for a lot of people.
Well, I'm going to have to figure it out pretty quick, and in about a year to 18 months, you'll know what my decision was.
Before we let you go, Mark, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words for our listeners.
Well, I've been greatly impacted by a musician that was huge in my day, but I'm a little older than the average person, a guy named Warren Zevon, who was famous for his song Werewolves of London. And Warren Zevon tragically died some years ago, and he was on the David Letterman show knowing that he didn't have that much longer to live. And David Letterman asked him, he said, Warren, what do you know as a person facing the end of his life that I, as presumably a person that's healthy and will be alive for a long time, don't know? And I loved his response. He didn't get all serious and weepy. He just smiled and said, well, I guess I'd say enjoy every sandwich. And that's kind of become my motto, whether I'm eating lunch or I'm washing my car or I'm hanging out with my family or on a plane. You better enjoy every sandwich because someday there won't be any more sandwiches. And it's better to start enjoying them now than when you know that the end is imminent. That
is a great quote and some great parting words. So, Mark, I just want to say thank you very much, not only for your time, but what you shared with us today. I truly appreciate it. And I look forward to hopefully speaking with you soon.
Thanks, Chris. My pleasure.
To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, giving, Mark Sanborn touched upon some pretty basic yet powerful concepts. Mark has written some incredible books over the last 10 plus years, and the best part about his work is that what he writes about is transferable to all walks of life. We briefly discussed how you don't need a title to be a leader, and also just because you might have a title doesn't mean you are guaranteed to be a good one. Mark said two things in particular that I thought were great. First, he said that fame is what you get, while greatness is what you give. He also stated that true leadership benefits the greater good. In his closing remarks, he mentioned the importance of enjoying every sandwich. So my call to action today is very simple. Enjoy it. Enjoy today. Enjoy your family, your spouse, your work, your friends, and truly enjoy the day. Smile, pay it forward, and give. Give something to someone as you go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.